I don't want to forget.
Well, aren't they technically the good signal? Technically, it's like
every meeting.
Can't win from.
Well, you just bring it in glasses early.
yeah, I felt fine, but I went to bed.
You look very different.
What first, right? That's where the agenda item.
Yes.
None of my kids made it to the tour, so some of them late.
Oh no.
Ready to go.
I like the video. Yeah, it was
Open. Turn on. I just happened to fix it too.
need more seating. So.
It's gonna do this, look, Tuesday.
I've been
Christine and Amelia went over to the college to sign up for 2 classes. So
Maria, all the files up and you ready to go? All the presentations in you all set ready? Mayor, we're ready whenever you are.
You ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting of the Sierra Vista City Council for a work session for the 21st of May to order. I want to apologize for having to relocate. When we relocate, we need to make sure all our electronics are available so we can broadcast and record and whatever, so it takes a few minutes. And I think the city manager knows this, but since he's not here, anytime we start bringing in chairs, additional chairs to the room downstairs, it's time to consider moving up. So we can do that a little earlier next time, perhaps. Okay, so on the top of today's agenda, first is the council meeting agenda items for the council meeting on the 23rd. And as we normally do, we'll have the call to order, roll call, invocation, pledge of allegiance, and acceptance of the agenda. We didn't have the city manager's report. Is there anything, Victoria, that you'd like to say about the city manager's report?
Mr. Mayor, there's one thing I would like to say now. Thank you. Beside the regular bid openings and awards and upcoming meetings and such, there's a piece of news I'd like to share with council that I'll share again on Thursday night. But that's that the city was successful, and that was through the efforts of many elected officials, you, Mr. Mayor, our county sheriff, in getting $271,000 for CCOM included in the state's proposed budget that was released yesterday. And so it is not yet finished budget, but we're hoping that that stays in, and that'll be a great thing for Sierra Vista and the county and the future ensured success of CCOM.
And the money is focused on statewide communications to bring the state into a network eventually across the entire state. And I have, in fact, called our senator and representatives as well and thanked them for their work this morning and the continued diligence to make sure it stays in the budget until the state budget gets passed. So that was great work on the part of the staff and our agents up in Phoenix as well. So thank you for that. Next item is the consent agenda, which is the meeting minutes for May 9th. Any additions, deletions, corrections on the minutes for May 9th? Okay, and then there's a resolution for appointment to the Library Commission. Any comments or discussion on that item? All right, then we go to public hearing item. I'll just, before we mention the liquor license item number 3 with Ms. Adams, I'll mention that we still have 2 public hearings out there. One is for the buses, and the other one is, remind me quick, Community Development Block Grant. So if there are members of the public that want to come and talk to us about those particular items on Thursday, we would appreciate that. So item number 3, Mrs. Adams, would you give us a staff report, please?
Mayor Mueller, members of council. The application that will be before you on Thursday night is for a person location transfer of a Series 7, which is a beer and wine bar license. It's coming over to the Best Western Plus Hotel on Garden Avenue. It's coming from Bisbee. And the notice of the public hearing was posted on the facility for the required number of days. There has been no comment, pro or con, from the public. The police department has done a background check and has no objection, and if approved on Thursday, it will be forwarded for final action at the state level.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. Any questions for Mrs. Adams on this? Yes, ma'am.
What did you mean it's coming from Bisbee?
This is a quota license, and those are restricted to the county that they are originally issued in. So this, it was purchased, and then they brought it to Vista.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mrs. Adams. Under new business, item number 4 is a request to proceed on an annexation. Mr. Fisher, will you give us our staff report, please?
Good afternoon, members of council, staff, and public. Today we have a request to proceed for the Golf Links annexation, which includes 4 properties in the East Golf Links area, as seen on the map here. I'll zoom in on a closer view so we can take a look at them. The city received 2 requests for annexations in the area, and following a survey effort, 2 additional interested properties that were adjacent to the initial ones were discovered. These properties exist within a county enclave, which is a proactive annexation area, and these areas have been deemed as providing strategic benefit to the city, such as economic benefits and connectivity to existing city areas, which allows for the logical extension of city services. Should the request to proceed be approved, planning staff will move forward with the annexation process, beginning with the filing for blank petitions and setting up a public hearing.
Any questions from Mr. Fisher?
Just really quick, Mr. Mayor. Just so I understand, and I guess so the public understands, these are people that have actually asked to be part of the city. This is not people that we are.
2 of the property owners asked. They initially came to the city. They came to Tina Moore while she was still working as one of our planners, and they came to her asking about the potential to annex. And as part of that, we reached out to their surrounding neighbors to see if we could get a larger amount of people that would be interested. And we found 2 more properties who said that they were interested in annexing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And those properties are surrounded by county?
Yes, let me pull up the other map here so you can see an idea. Everything in the gray here is stuff that's in the county. This is part of the county enclave. And in the green, that's the areas that we're hoping to annex.
White's in the city. The white areas in the city.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In the text, it said, not just maybe for my own benefit and for benefit of the audience, but that we have proactive annexation areas and other annexation areas. Is there action that we currently take to be proactive annexation areas? So this was in what we considered a proactive annexation area because of its being in a county enclave, right?
As the county enclave automatically makes it a proactive area because the city currently has an effort to try to annex all these holes within our city so that we kind of have a contiguous border that is uninterrupted, so it doesn't look like Swiss cheese, basically. And so we can keep all of our services sort of organized, and it's less confusing for police department and other services like trash.
And fire.
What is something that we do to be proactive? What are part of that effort?
We usually engage with the community. We do surveys from time to time about areas in these county enclaves, like our recent attempt with the Fry. And we also did Rancho Carmelo recently. And we sort of just survey, sort of get an idea of what properties are interested. Usually citizens will come to us because there's certain benefits, such as tax benefits to annexing with the city, and as well as different services like trash that they may be interested in. And so they ask their neighbors, and then we sort of keep track of who's interested and who's not, and we'll even go door to door and ask, and we'll keep records and maps of sort of who's interested and who's not, and which owners, and all that property owner information. So we have an idea of whether it is feasible to expend these resources and human capital on an annexation attempt.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Thank you, Blake. Good job.
Yeah, good job.
All right, then, item number 5 is Strategic Council Plan. Ms. Yarborough.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the fiscal year 2020-21 strategic plan framework in front of you for your vote this week. Overall, the plan identifies 10 goals for completion over the next 2 years with 39 accompanying actions. And just for comparison, in the previous 2-year plan, there were only 19 actions. So this goal is ambitious, but very, very achievable. And so the changes that are in the version you were looking at from the last work session we had, I'll run through very quickly. There weren't many of them, but these were all based on comments from you at the last work session. So under the engaged goal, the goals, the goals 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 were moved from under the enjoy goal, and goal number 3 was moved, and then goal 1, 2, 3 actions at the bottom were moved from the enjoy goal. 3.3 was changed to remove events, so it just reads offer more opportunities for social media engagement, not solely at events. In the enhance goal, goal 2.3 was changed to simply prioritize funding for CDBG. 2.7 was changed to be less specific. The previous version identified working on a land swap. We know that's not something the school district is interested in at this point, so that was changed to be a little less specific on working them on how we can cooperatively use our assets to the good of the public. Under enjoy, there were no changes to empower. And under enjoy, I apologize, there was one mistake. I neglected to remove goal number 3 from under enjoy, so that will come out on Thursday. Goal 1.1 was reworded to add diversity. And goal 2.2 was changed from GoFundMe to refer specifically to crowdsourcing. Be happy to answer any additional questions about the plan.
Questions?
On your opening, the opening statement, I do have a question. Let me find it. Where did I see the opening statement? Is it in your, let's see, it referred to the fact that it's not in this document online, I just saw it. It referred to the fact that for the action items, staff would make decisions about which commissions and boards would assist or could assist with the goal, with whatever the action was. Do you know where I read that?
Councilmember Calhoun, I think you're referring to, let's see,
That's
1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph on the cover page of the council memo. It says appropriate staff will identify within the action plans where and how appropriate boards or commissions can participate.
Right. I'm a little confused by that. At what point does council get involved with what actions commissions take? I don't see that. You know, in the past, and I believe it's referred to some degree in the board and commission practice and procedure manual.
So
that-
what I'm sorry, I did not mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, because you'll help clarify what I'm trying to.
So the way that this has been handled in the past is when the new fiscal year starts and staff brings the action plan to you. That will identify which commissions can help with which goals. If at that point council feels like a commission was overlooked or they would prefer specific commission work or doesn't work on a specific goal, that would be the time to discuss it and decide.
Okay, so you're saying that happens 1st of July timeframe?
It'll be in the July, August timeframe.
That sounds good.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm
sorry.
Go ahead.
I think for me, for the strategic plan, and this is something, unfortunately, I missed the last plan, although I spoke to Ms. Yarborough before it happened and I listened to everything that was going on. I'm still, even though this is our strategic plan as a council, I'm still unsure actually about what various council members really want and are interested in, and as to whether or not this actually reflects what they want to happen.
Well, this is a collective, obviously.
And I understand that, but I still.
That's a challenge, and obviously you can talk to individual council members to find out what they specifically support or what they don't support. And what we're doing on Thursday is basically saying this is our plan for the next, collectively, this is our plan for the next year. If you want to discuss those points on Thursday or even today, you're more than welcome to do that and do that in open forum.
And for me, what I honestly would ask is for, because this is something that I thought would actually come out in the strategic plan, and to me it did not in the entire session that we've been doing, and we've done a few of them, is honestly for me, I would really like to know what my fellow council members, what their priorities are and what they like. I understand that this is something that we're trying to pull together and that I'm going to agree with some things and I'm not going to agree with some things, and I get that, but I honestly have no idea where several of my council members stand.
I just want to say, I think everyone is aware that I was, and I believe other council members may have expressed that same point, we're still trying to work out what will be best in the way we develop our strategic plan. And although what's put together here looks really good, and some of it reflects well the conversations we had during strategic planning. And I raised this point last time, we still don't have this sense of what do individual council members want. And I believe that comes from, as you said, Christine, I believe that comes from just the way we put the strategic plan together. And that this would, as the mayor said, be a good opportunity, and maybe not so good because we didn't expect it to happen today, but an opportunity for me to sit here and say, it's really, really important to me that we do this, this, and this. And then somebody else will come in and say, what's really, really important to them. And then we hash through that in a public setting, what could work, what might work, what may not work. At the same time, we recognize that staff is going to do most of the work involved in whatever the goals are that we decide on. But that will be next, as it was for this time, but we didn't get to hash out what's most important to you, enjoying, engaging, enhancing, and what parts of those are major. And then, as one thing that was raised earlier, the fire station, why are we putting in the fire station? Raise that issue again if we need to. I know.
Medical station.
Pardon me?
Medical station.
Medical station, yeah, it's not a full. And I think somebody raised to me too, the public doesn't always know why we're doing certain things, as in the medical station. Why do we need to put in that? And it was referred to as a fire station, because that's the public's perception. And I'm kind of getting off track with what we were originally talking about, and that's for council to really, as a council, and with all due respect to staff, without input first we make some decisions about the strategic plan. And, we've been working on this for several years, and sometimes these things just have to develop and evolve. But I believe that's what you're expressing. Am I close to it? I know I jumped around a bit, but I couldn't more agree with what Christine is saying.
Rachel.
Thank you,
Let me
Mayor, for
be
bringing
the
that
mayor, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know
So-
you seen her hand.
It sounds like, just from what you're hearing, what you're saying, and then other council members that have spoken to, is usually during that first administrative session in January, we have a time where we go in and do priorities of council, and I know that didn't happen this time, and I think that was missing. And also in the strategic planning, that's missing. So there does seem to be a consensus, especially with the newer council members, and I don't want to speak for them, but I'll just try to sum up what has been said to me. But they were very prepared to come in, and they wanted, very anxious to share with us what they wanted. So maybe if we had an administrative session, Mayor, before we approve this, not an actual strategic planning session, but another administrative meeting where they could talk about their priorities and make sure it lines up with what we have in this document.
Well, let me ask just this general question. Based on what's been prepared, and hopefully you've had a chance to read it and consider it, how many people really feel that, how many council members really feel that the needs of the city and their things that, the majority of the things that, everybody knows they're not gonna get everything they want, but the majority of things are met in this document?
I do feel like the majority of things are met personally, but that's just me.
Anybody want to comment?
I mean, I talked about this last time, and I'm glad that I brought up points the last time we looked at this. And I feel like I was listened to and changes were made, but it was kind of like we just made the changes, but we didn't really make a consensus of council. I said, this is what matters to me, but we didn't say, I don't know if it matters to you guys. You know, changes were just made. And, you know, one of those I brought up last time, I'll bring up again, was addressing homelessness in the community. And it's not mentioned at all. And the other was the need for business incubation. We talked about that, and I just would want to see justification there or something. To me, that we have so many entities that do that, that I don't know if that's a city
Which one are
role.
you referring to?
Okay, so,
There's 3 action items related to business incubation that I would have a question. Yeah.
okay, so what I'm hearing here is that we need another work session before this comes on the agenda.
I agree.
So we need to have one specific agenda, we would need to have one specific work session. And your request was that everybody talks about what their specific priorities are and whether or not they're satisfied with the current.
Yes, I just think so. Whether I
That's what I'm
agree,
hearing.
I think it's going to help us come to a consensus and understand where everybody's coming from. I don't understand where, and I think we have a great council, but I don't completely know where everyone's coming from, and I think we need to come together before we do that.
Okay, so what I'm gonna propose then, and it's a homework assignment basically for the council, is when we have this next work session, whenever it may be scheduled, and it'll be scheduled soon, because obviously we need to have this done, we can have it done a little after the start of the fiscal year, but it's gotta be pretty close. The homework assignment is basically to review the document, as you probably already have for Thursday, and just review it with the eye. What else is in here what is my priorities that are reflected? What are my priorities that aren't reflected? And be prepared to, at the work session, we're just gonna go down the line and have everybody present their little thing, and then we're gonna have some discussion on the points to see where we're at, okay? That sound like a workable plan?
Yes, it does.
Okay, all right,
you.
so,
How about
any other
question
discussions on this one? Yes, ma'am.
for Victoria? Victoria, you mentioned that there were 39 actions that were listed here. And do you remember last year how many goals we had compared to this year's? This
I
year.
don't have the number of goals. I only counted up that there were 19 actions before.
Okay.
I think there were 7.
7.
I think so.
More
'cause it was
goals with
the-
fewer actions.
Yeah, it was the, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on item 4?
So we're gonna take this
Item-
off the agenda?
Well, we'll move the strategic plan off the agenda. That's item 5, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
So next we have item number 6, a agreement with the town of Wachuca City for animal care services. Mrs. Yarborough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The current agreement with the town of Wichita City expires on June 30th. And so this agreement has no substantive changes. It simply moves the terms of the agreement from the end of this year to July 1, ending June 30th, 2020, and extending for 3 one-year periods after that. I'll let you know that since we started this agreement, we've only taken in about 36 animals from Wichita City and has not affected our animal shelter operations in any significant way. If you have any further questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions for Mrs. Yarborough? Okay, thank you very much. We can now move on to item 7, which is the support agreement with VICAP for a Tohono O'odham Nation grant.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. VICAP has applied for a couple of years now, and the city has acted as a pass-through for them. Last year, they were successful in their grant application. And so this year, their grant application is for $10,000 to offset the increased cost of mileage for their volunteers. It's simply reimbursement for them. And there are no issues with us acting as pass-through agent for VICAP. We have also acted in such a way for other community organizations.
And the reason we do that is because the Tohono O'odham have actually a requirement that it goes to a government agency. And that's why we act as a pass-through.
Correct.
Any questions or discussion? Okay. I don't see anything else on the council agenda for that particular evening, so we'll move on to discussion of the transit plan. And we should have, there he is. Oh, you're gonna do it, Sharon? Okay, all right.
Give me just a second here. All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council, good to be back before you again. This is an update to the public comment period that's been ongoing for the last 4 weeks or so on the transit route modifications. So just as a brief recap, these are some of the efficiency recommendations that came out of a study done by AECOM 2018, and some of the things we were trying to incorporate into the new routing. So first of all, expanded hours for routes 4 and 5 to match the schedule on the other routes. That's been a common source of complaints for us, that routes 4 and 5 have reduced times associated with them and make it difficult for people to get places. Also, interline routes to allow more one-seat rides across town routes, so reducing the reliance on transfers. And then providing multiple transfer points for people in the system, not just at the transit center. So in going through the process, we think we've been able to accomplish each one of these, and I'll talk more about how we did it further on in the presentation. So as I mentioned, the public process has been ongoing for about the last 4 weeks. The new routes were presented, City Council work session, February 26th, and a City Council meeting, April 25th. We also held an open house at the Transit Center, April 18th, followed by a public hearing at the council meeting on April 25th. And we had the public comment period that's ongoing right now. Basically, as comments started coming in, we started making changes to the routes and looking at better ways to do things. And we have updated the route plan based on the public input, and you're going to see some fairly significant changes. And the revised routes are being presented to you today. So just as a brief recap, here's the existing route system that we have in place. There's currently 5 routes, and I'm excluding the Fort Huachuca and the weekend shopper routes because we're not proposing any changes to those at this time. but there are currently 5 routes. 3 of them operate on 30-minute loops. The other 2 are on 1-minute loops because they were combined a few years ago due to staffing challenges and also as a savings measure. Those are routes 4 and 5. Those
1 hour loops.
1 hour loops,
You said
correct.
minute.
Sorry. That's a very quick loop. So that's the existing route system. This is what we had proposed in the public meetings. Some of the significant changes is we went from 5 routes down to 3, and those 3 routes were operating on 1 hour loops, not 1 minute, 1 hour loops. We also made some fairly significant changes in terms of we eliminated a section along Coronado Drive. We added routing around the bypass as a efficiency measure to get to areas on the east side of Sierra Vista more quickly. We did add redundancy into the system with multiple routes stopping at Walmart. And then we also expanded service out to the hospital, also to Teleperformance, Campus Drive, and Buena High School. That would initially be by request. We're not sure yet what the demand is going to be, but there is some interest there. So that's what we were able to do. This is what went out to the public. This is what we've received comments on. And where we are today, this is the revised route system. You notice some similarities to the existing and also to what we proposed. The biggest change you see on this is Coronado Drive is back. The reason Coronado's back, we heard from quite a few people concerns about eliminating that section of the route, and also to facilitate the PepTech concern that we heard about at the last council meeting. The best way to do that was to reinstitute the Coronado Drive route. That was the quickest way to get there. So we have addressed the PepTech concern with this. These students will actually get to school sooner with the new routing than they are under the existing routing. So consider that a win. Yes, Councilmember Calhoun.
1 hour route?
It is. Yeah, all of the routes are still 1 hour. But the big change is the orange route and the blue route loop back to the transit center on a half-hour interval. The green route does not, because we are not able to loop back to the transit center because we got to make it all the way out to the hospital. So that is the only route that doesn't come back to the transit center on the half-hour interval. So let's just take a standard student from PepTech. The principal had mentioned that the majority of them live on the west side of Sierra Vista. So they would get on the orange route. They would then connect with the blue route at the transit center on a half-hour interval. The blue route would take them down and to school. That's how they get there faster. So as I noted, 2 of the 3 routes now loop back to the transit center. We also eliminated service on the bypass. That was something that we heard in the public comment periods. People didn't feel like that was the safest option. They were concerned about the higher speeds. So the bypass is now gone. We have kept the redundant stops at Walmart. They are staggered at that location. We also have some redundancy, and I'll show it to you in the actual route timing here coming up, but we also have redundancy at San Pedro Apartments and Cochise College. You can see the orange and green routes there are very close. And then we also have Fry's and Food City are on multiple routes. The advantage of this system is now, if you get on to what we formerly knew as Route 1, the West Side route, you will be able to stay on the same bus and get out to the shopping areas all on one bus. Now, you won't have to do a transfer. If that is your goal, which it is for many of our passengers, is to go shopping, you'll be able to stay on the same bus. So this is actually the proposed schedule, so you can actually look at the timings. Kudos to Mike, who spent a lot of time putting this all together, and Nancy, who was driving for Mike much of the time, and came up with this proposed schedule. So you see Walmart, the orange route will get to Walmart at 46 after the hour. The green route gets there at 48, and the blue route gets there at 54. So we won't have all 3 buses there at one time. They will be staggered arriving there. That was another concern, is having all 3 of them arrive at the same time, there not being enough room. So they are staggered to some degree. And then also you can see Fry's shows up on both the orange route, the green route, and the green route. So that's some of the, opportunities people will have to make transfers between routes at locations other than the transit center. So just a little bit about the financials. The top part of the graph here is where we're currently at on operating costs, just short of $400,000 a year. And the new routing down at the bottom, by consolidating routes, we can get down to about $280 per year. And about 50% of those savings would then be in the general fund. So a few of the key considerations when looking at these, number of routes reduced from 4 to 3. I talked earlier about, technically there's 5 routes, but 2 of them run together on the 1-hour loop. All routes will now operate from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., alleviating the concern of people that we had one route that was operating at different times. Multiple transfer points on the system. We've also been able to keep the expanded service area. All the areas I talked about that we were hoping to reach, we are still reaching with the new routing plan. And also the savings to the general fund. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yes, sir.
I got a couple real quick. Have we identified, or are we able to identify places that we need better bus stops?
Yes, we have. Mike and his staff have already gone through that process and determined where we are lacking infrastructure. So we know where those areas are, we know what we need to add, and we'll begin a process of doing that. Obviously, it can't all happen overnight. I can't promise that on day number 1 it would all be in place. That takes some time, but we do have a list and we know where we need to get to and what we need to add.
Okay, and then just one more. With veterans being a big concern in the area, I'd like to see, and I didn't see it on the map, I'd like to see if we could get a stop at the clinic over off of Martin Luther King, I guess, or Coronado. It turns into Martin Luther King. I don't know what the right name is, but
routing plan. Under the revised routing plan, we have a stop across the street next to the Cimarron subdivision. There's a bus pull out there on Coronado Drive, so it's a short walk across the street.
okay. Thank you.
Is it possible to get an approximate cost of the infrastructure for a bus stop that you could, whatever you're calling it?
Councilmember Calhoun, I would be able to information. I don't have that with me today.
My reason for asking is I'm curious that there may be community entities that be interested in helping to support the structures at different.
Just off the top of my head, I would say it's probably a few $1,000s each. It would depend on whether the service is contracted out, whether we do it in-house. A fair amount of the cost is going to be in the concrete and then the physical structure itself. But certainly, if there is anyone who is interested in being part of that effort, the city would absolutely welcome that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I was going to second Gwen's suggestion. I attended a ribbon cutting Saturday in Agua Prieta for bus stops that were funded by entities in Sierra Vista. So, with their government and stuff. So there's groups here that are already doing that kind of work. It might be great to partner with.
Yeah,
So
it's a wonderful thing.
my suggestion, if I could follow up to Mayor, okay. With one question, is there a hypothetical safety issue with being on the bypass, or is that an actual issue? Like, do you have data or statistics or anything to back that up, or was it just perceived?
I would say it's more a perceived issue due to the higher speeds. Currently, the roads our buses operate under are on, all of them I can think of are 45 miles an hour and under, and the only one that immediately comes to mind that's 45 is sections of State Route 92 and Avenida Cochise. So I think it's just that our ridership is used to lower speeds. And certainly if you're on a higher speed roadway, you have the potential for a higher severity crash if it were to happen. But I think it's largely a perception issue, but we could avoid it by just some simple rerouting and alleviate those concerns.
Hey, I was talking to Mike about it. I'm sorry I could have asked. With going to the smaller buses, are there hours or days that we know are going to be busier than most where we would use the bigger buses or swap them out, or are our plan just to go right with the small buses and keep going?
I would have to defer to Mike on operational. Mike, you want to take one?
Currently, there are some days that we know have higher ridership, usually the first part of the month where people get their Social Security checks, and then there's a discount day at Fry's. So we know generally we have a pattern of higher ridership on those days and for those routes, and we do use our larger buses at those times. But we are moving towards a smaller platform with what's called the RBOC bus. But we still have the Eldorados. We'll keep those around for a while, and we'll monitor the ridership to see what adjustments we need to make. But right now, we do use the larger buses on the days that we know will have higher ridership.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
A final comment from me is, I really want to thank you, Sharon, Mike, and all your staff for how responsive you were to the comments that the public made. I know we try our best, but in this case, I really believe you went over and above because you responded to almost every single issue that the public raised concerning the rides and their comfort and everything about the ride. So thank you so much, both of you and all of your staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Calhoun. I would say that this is definitely a situation where the public comment process has worked. The public saw things we didn't see and enabled us to make the routes better.
Okay, so before I let you go, I want to echo what the good councilwoman just said, is you guys did an excellent job on this. I think, Mike, you and your folks should be congratulated on trying to figure out the best way to serve the public. And I think we were about the point where we've got this transit system right-sized for our community for the next 5 to 10 years, which is good and will save money in the long run. I see one thing that's still hanging out there for the director of Sharon.
Public Works.
Public Works, yeah. And that is, we need to have a plan developed for installation of appropriate stops at certain locations. It needs to be a specific plan that says we can afford to do so many this year, and this is where they're going to go, so many next year, and have a build-out plan so that we have those locations that we are lacking appropriate size shelters, appropriate shelters that will shield people from the sun, the wind, the rain, et cetera. And so we need to look at that and come back with a plan for us, and that's not going to happen. It's probably too late for this year's budget, but again, we need to have a plan available to say what the needs are, what the standards are, and that needs to be developed somewhere in your department.
Agreed.
So that we can take that back out to the public and say, yes, we heard you, and we're going to build the appropriate shelters for you.
Agreed.
Okay.
Just a quick question, Mr. Mayor, it was kind of brought up. Can we use CDBG funds for some of these, depending on the location?
Matt?
I was thinking MPO.
Oh, yeah.
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 It's a tip that we're working on. Transportation Improvement Plan.
Yeah, but the thing about the MPO or the CDGB is you're talking primarily low income, and obviously if they're on the west side in those neighborhoods, that may be appropriate. But I think we're probably not too bad for shelters on that side. It's probably the newer areas that may not qualify for that money. So that may be problematic at best.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, man.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions for Sharon? Thank you, Sharon. You did a good job. Are you up for the next one too? Okay, go get your papers.
I have a
Okay.
few things to say, Mr. Mayor, before Sharon starts
Okay.
on her presentation. So a few things on why we're discussing the refuse fund in the way that we are this afternoon. Our enterprise funds, like the refuse funds, have to operate like a business. And what we mean specifically by that is we need to cover the cost of our operations. And the better and more efficiently we can do that, the lower we can keep the costs for the community overall. And so last year we were facing quite a significant fund shortfall. And because of that, council voted to increase the refuse rates for the community. And that made up about half of the shortfall that the fund was facing. And then you charge staff with seeking efficiencies in the way the fund was being run in ways that we could run it better to make up the rest of this. And so the rest of the shortfall. And so what staff has done is, again, the public works staff has done an excellent job identifying 3 areas within the refuse fund where in 2 areas, 2 of the services we were offering were operating or are operating at a significant loss. The other service we're going to talk about is operating at a profit, but there are a few very good reasons why and how we could do much better operating that service. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon, but I wanted to set the stage first for why we're presenting these fee increases to you today.
So with that introduction, I'll just go ahead and dive right in. All right, first area to talk about that we've identified is the residential dumpster program. And if your eyes are like mine, they went straight to the graph and the red on it. This is one of the programs that's operating at a loss. And basically what this is for the dumpsters are similar in size to what you would see at a commercial business, but they're available for residential use. The intention when the program was established was that they would be on a fairly short-term basis. You're doing a home improvement project. You don't need a full-scale roll-off, but you need something more than your trash can. And that's where the residential dumpster program came from. Unfortunately, some of them have ended up being long-term rentals where the dumpster will stay for years, which wasn't really ever the intention of the program. And bottom line is currently we're operating at negative $60,000 net revenue on the residential dumpster program. So keeping in mind that's an enterprise fund, that's a problem we need to fix.
Wait, ask you a question.
Excuse me, Sharon. Yeah. It operates at a loss because people don't pay the rent?
No, Councilmember Calhoun, people do pay, but one of the things that's missing from this program is a service fee to empty the dumpster. We charge people a tipping fee, but there is no service fee for the time our staff spends going out there. We also do not charge the residents, like we do for roll-offs, a depreciation fee. So for the amount of time they have the dumpster that it is in their possession, the city is paying that cost even though they are using the dumpster. So this makes the financials of the residential program look more like roll-off. Obviously cheaper than a roll-off is. Roll-off is 30 cubic yards. But it aligns the financials and what we are charging the resident more with the other programs we offer. So option A.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, Sharon, what that also means is there's currently no fee to deliver a dumpster to anyone. There's no fee to pick it back up when they're done. And while a fee is charged to that is equal to the cost to dump it, there's no fee to then for the truck to go and pick it up and take it out to dump it and bring it back.
Yeah, basically the only fee is whatever the county charges us at the scale for the weight of the dumpster. So option A would be to establish a service fee to deliver, empty, and remove the dumpster. Charge a disposal fee at cost plus 20%, increase the monthly lease fee to cost plus 50%, and this option would bring in net revenue of $35,000, basically. In terms of the cost plus, this is fairly standard in business. If you're operating a business, you're not just charging the cost, you're charging cost plus a little bit to cover all the incidentals associated with operating the program. So that's why we are proposing a cost plus. Option B is much the same as option A, but the cost pluses are a little bit less. The service fee is cost plus 25%. The disposal fee would be at cost, and the monthly lease fee would be a cost plus 30%. The net revenue, as you would expect, drops a little bit down to $24,000 a year, but we're still in the positive in terms of revenue. So the program would no longer be a loser.
And how are those prices and services comparable to any outside commercial company that would be offering this service?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that's a good question. These would be more in line with what private haulers are offering. This is a screaming deal right now. Actually, it's a little bit too good of a deal because if you only have this emptied, say once or twice a year, the cost for this is going to be far less than our green can
The
program.
reason I ask the question is because I am very concerned about if there are viable companies that provide this service to the public. I question whether or not it should be a municipal service. And are we competitive? Are we not competitive? At a minimum, we probably need to be at least competitive if we're going to stay in this business.
And Mr. Mayor, I believe that this will make us competitive. This program does or has the potential to bring in revenue. If we cut the program, we lose the revenue potential as well. Although I fully understand what you're saying as far as, you know, filling a niche.
Well, 23 or 35 grand isn't that much of a, you know, it's not a loss, but I mean,
Right.
it's not that much of an incentive for us to stay in business, whereby if there's a private hauler that can make money doing this at those margins, I'd rather have it done commercially. But again, and that's just a personal thing. Yes, sir. You
No,
had a
I,
question?
I agree, Mr. Mayor. I was looking at some of the companies local that do the same thing, and they're comparative to option B, so, but I didn't know if we wanted to take it the route that you were
yeah, no,
suggesting.
yeah, but I mean, there's more than one, you know, one option is option B and the other option is to not do it at all. Christine, did you have something?
No, I just said I thought that was a fair point.
I do too.
That's something we need to consider too, I think.
Okay. All right, next program talk about is the compost program. This is one that is actually currently running positive, but it is gross positive, not net positive. So although we are making money out there, it isn't really enough to cover our expenses. As noted here, we're undercharging for services and products, resulting in surplus material. That's the green waste coming in. We have piles coming in, more than we could possibly chip in a day, and hence we're building up green waste out there. And on the other side, the product is sold as quickly as it's produced. We finish the windrow, we load it into the hopper, and sometimes it's gone within a few days. So this tells us that our supply and demand curves are a little bit out of whack. We're getting too much on the front end, and we're getting rid of it very, very quickly on the back end. Another issue we have out there is currently we do not charge city residents to bring in green waste, but we have definite expenses associated with operating that operation. Maintaining the chipper out there, the staffing out there, all the testing we have to do to meet ADEQ standards. So we have definite expenses. The other thing we find is that residents in the county will borrow a refuse bill from a friend in the city, and all they have to do is show their bill, and they get in for no cost. You would think it's $5, but it happens fairly frequently out there. So at a minimum, what we are proposing as part of option B is charge.
Just a question on that, Karen. I don't understand, Sharon, I don't understand in our process I understand showing the bill, because I've done that myself, but showing the bill and having a driver's license with your name on it to show that you're at least related to the person that's in the house might be a better procedure than just showing the bill.
Yeah, and that's a good comment, Mr. Mayor. Our workers out at compost, depending on the volume for the day, things get busy.
do get busy.
People get belligerent with them sometimes. Why are you asking to see that? And
Well, that's why you have a sign posted, here's the requirements.
yeah, and we do, and it's still an issue.
Yeah.
So what we're proposing at a minimum is option B, charge all customers $5 coming in. That at least minimally helps cover our costs to process the material. And then increasing the compost price from $15 a cubic yard to $25 a cubic yard. That's about one pickup truck full, just for point of comparison. This would bring in gross revenue of around $111,000 per year. And again, we're not talking net revenue here, we are talking gross revenue. But at least helping to make that operation a little bit more sustainable. Option A is a little further increase on that. All customers would be charged $10 coming in, which, as I mentioned, currently city customers don't pay anything. County pays $5, so we would charge everyone $10. And then again, increasing the compost price from $15 up to $25. That brings in gross revenue of about $184,000 per year. There is, one anecdotal story I can share with you here that currently, with the prices we're charging for our compost, it has come to our attention that in at least one case, our compost is being bought by a major supplier and then resold at a higher price. That's how far below market we are. Is they are buying our compost at price, large quantities of it, and then reselling it at a higher price. In an attempt prior to these changes to take care of that issue, one of the things we've done is put a limit on the amount that people can purchase. So with this growing season, that we now have a 2-yard limit per customer, and to help avoid resale. You can bring in a truck with a trailer attached and we'll give you 2 yards, but you can't bring in a semi and ask us to load the semi for you.
Could we come to I know people don't want to pay, it's a pain to get people to pay a different price because you have a lot going on, but could we make it like instead of $10 for everybody, $10 for everybody unless you show that your city and you reach over, since you should have your ID anyway, and show both and get 5. If they're going to go through the trouble of trying to get it down $5 anyway, I think they would be okay with getting out their ID. And
you'd be surprised.
I just think we should still incentivize or make it cheaper for the city residents.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
We don't adjust prices for any other services that are available, I don't think, do we? Like library leisure, do you charge different
No.
prices for different people?
You don't do it for the library because the library is based on the county system, so there's another alternative reason there.
What about
And I don't know about all the other sports
Swimming,
complex.
anything
We don't, it's the same price for entrance to the Cove and all the other stuff for everybody else. But those are not enterprise funds. This is an enterprise fund where we're supposed to run it like a business. We're supposed to at least break even or better, but not a whole lot of profit. Yeah.
And you might get there, I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but if we do option A or B for compost, and we do option A or B for residential rentals, and I don't know if there's a change, the file wouldn't load, I apologize. Is there a chance on the back end, each resident gets a smaller amount of sewer/trash bill each month?
Well, I think the answer to that question is this is we're talking trash right here. We're not talking, because the sewer's a separate fund. But the bottom line here, I think you haven't made the point yet, is that we still have a deficit that we have to overcome, and the increasing in these prices will prevent that deficit, will overcome that deficit.
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay,
So that's the benefit to the public. They're not going to get another increase.
gotcha. Okay, Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Now, one of our goals with these recommendations was to avoid the across-the-board rate increase and instead only identify those areas that are currently operating either at a loss or have other inefficiencies associated with them and limit the fee increases to those areas. So not everyone would necessarily pay an increased fee. If they do not use these services, they would see no change in their fees. All right, and moving on, and this kind of ties in with the compost program somewhat, but our special pickup green waste program. Currently, these are combined operating at a net negative of 81,000. Just as a primer, currently on our bulky waste pickups, we charge $14.40 for that service. And I'm not sure exactly, it predates my time a little bit, where that number came from. It's a rather specific number. And I'm not entirely sure where that came from, but $14.40. Our actual cost to provide that service is around $32. So for each one we do, we are losing $18 in revenue. And the green waste, currently, that program is free. And our costs there are a little bit less because we don't have things like stickers that we have for the bulky waste pickups. So we charge $0, and our actual costs are around $22 for every green waste pickup. So that's how we get to the negative 81. And clearly, if we're talking about changes out at the compost facility, if we institute a fee for all vehicles coming in, then this is the next logical location we need to look at in terms of fees. Because if we charge people, say, $5 a load to bring compost or bring green waste to us at the transfer center, then we can't offer to pick it up for free at their house. That's counterintuitive. Logic says that you would have a fee that is at least what you are charging if they bring the waste themselves out to the compost center. So just a few options here. Option A, consolidate the special pickup and green waste program so we would have one fee to cover both rather than separate fee schedules. Already talked about the current fee, and option A would be the proposed fees equal to cost of providing the service plus 30%. Net revenue for that is $26,000. And then option B, much the same, but provide fees equal to the cost plus 40%. Net revenue is about $35,000 on that option. One thing I will note too, again, talking about markets and the purpose of an enterprise fund is to be self-sustaining, run like a business. We do know that other businesses do provide some appliance hauling. If you buy an appliance from a local store, you can pay to have that appliance hauled away. If you would like, that fee is significantly more than what we're charging. So needless to say, our program is popular because it's so much less than what the market is. And dovetailing into the recycling drop-off program, part of our reason for going through these efforts isn't just to take a look at the bottom line in the enterprise fund, although that's certainly an important consideration. But when we start talking about the recycling drop-off program, start working through all the things that we need to there, one of the givens when we started this effort was that the recycling drop-off center would need to be staffed. Otherwise, contamination rates are just too high and the material is not marketable. So by making these changes, we're not only hoping to improve the health of the fund, but also to find a way to free up staff to staff the recycling drop-off center without hiring any new staff. So it has been a large puzzle we've been working on for the last couple weeks, trying to figure out how to shift all these pieces and come up with a solution that makes sense. But that is one of our end goals, is to identify existing staff members to help run the recycling drop-off center. But with the recycling drop-off, we would propose the end of residential curbside recycling service at the end of June 2019, go for a fresh start in the fiscal year, although there isn't any particular reason why July 1st is a magic date. We could certainly pick any date we wanted to. Recycling drop-off center phase 1 would be proposed to begin operations in July. The location would be out at the compost facility. And the reason it would be out there is we have the land available. We have some level of staffing there currently at the compost facility. We have a building with restrooms. There's fence already located on site. So our operational and overhead costs to get that started at that location are less than some of the other areas we were looking at. As I noted, staffing for the recycling center we're hoping can be achieved through reallocation of resources, currently providing less effective services. And the revenues to offset the cost of the recycling center will be realized through sales of the recyclables. As long as we can keep them clean, our data currently indicates that this is a revenue potential for the city.
What happens with all the blue cans?
Good question.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time mulling over that question because we currently have about 11,000 of them out on the street. Our initial plan involved some sort of a pickup, and we realized that was going to take months with staff working on Saturdays. We estimate about 3 months with staff working on Saturdays to get all those cans picked up. Recently, through discussions, we came up with what we believe is a superior alternative, and it came as a result of other people asking the same question. What's going to happen to my can, and is there any chance I can keep it? And we thought, you know, from a cost perspective, that's not a bad idea. When we look at how much we would spend going out and picking up the cans from every individual residence, if people want to keep the can, realistically, it doesn't have a lot of value to us. We could return it to the original supplier, but the shipping costs and what we would get in return probably wouldn't even be enough to cover the cost of the shipping.
Just the storage cost would be
Yep.
immense.
That was the other consideration, is that to store them, we'd have to knock the wheels off each individual can so they would stack, because they don't stack with the wheels on them. It was a snowball when we started looking at what it would take. People told us there are things I would be happy to use that can for. I could use it for firewood. I could use it for water harvesting. I could use it to hold my recyclables so I can take them out to the drop-off center. We would still provide an option if people really didn't want the can. They said, I just don't have room for it. It's an extra, please come pick it up. We would provide an option to people that they could call in, and then we would schedule those individual can pickups as they align with our schedule.
I just have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, just to go along with that, if we did have people just keep the cans and ultimately we were not using it for recycling, should something happen to the can, would we just, life happens and move
Yep.
on with our lives?
Exactly.
So my question would be, Sharon, just, so if we do keep both, which I think is an excellent idea, but then it wouldn't matter if it's the green or the blue out by the curb either?
We talked about that, and actually it would, due to the way our rate structure is currently set up. We would want people to use that blue can for the other stuff. We would want them to put their green can out. And the reason is we charge a different rate based on the size of the green can. Like for example, at my house have a 65-gallon green can. When we issued the blue cans, we only did them in 95 gallons.
Right.
So I could gain 30 gallons by putting out the blue can instead of my green can, but I would still be paying the green can rate, which isn't fair to the people who are paying the 95-gallon green can rate.
Understood. And so then would it be a phase-in process then? As like right now, I know some people are putting blue cans out for green just because it's confusing at the moment.
Yeah, it is, and you won't have the every other week anymore. It will be Green Canyon's always all the time. We could that might actually prolong the confusion, because if your neighbor has out a and you're thinking you can put out a blue can, so it might be one of those situations that if we try to come up with a solution, it ends up making it.
Understood. I guess what I'm thinking about that is just making sure that we get everyone educated. Also take a long time.
Right.
So I don't want you guys flooded with calls either that their cans didn't get picked up.
And some of that will happen anytime we make a change. That does happen. I think this one is potentially a less painful change than what we were looking at before.
That way.
And I think the allowing people to keep the can was a good insight that came out of some of our discussions, because it was really looking very, very intensive to try to find a way to pick those up. And as the mayor said, find a place to store them. Where do you put 11,000 cans?
The mayor has plenty of property.
Yeah, I got plenty of property.
Mr. Mayor, two questions, maybe a couple, but, so with the recycling right now, is it being recycled? Like, is the county just dumping it?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, we deliver the material to the county. What happens at the county is completely out of our control. My understanding is they've been looking at markets and trying to market the material as best they can, doing what they can that makes sense financially. Is it as much as we would like? Probably not. It's just due to the changes that have come about in China. The material value has just plummeted, especially for mixed stream. So when they're getting a lot of mixed stream materials in, sorting through it to make it at all marketable is very, very difficult. What the county has told us is that they are only able to do that when they have DOC workers available, and otherwise they are not able to process the material.
So they sometimes are recycling it, but sometimes it just goes to the landfill anyways?
That's my understanding.
And you'll get a better answer if you ask that question of Mr. Patuchik. And in case people don't know, DOC was Department of Corrections.
Yes.
Okay.
The other question, if I could follow up, was originally we talked about the recycling drop-offs having multiple points, and now it's just all back out at the facility. Have we priced that out at all or looked at it at all?
The facility out at Compost would be phase one. We are still looking at the others. Option number 2, if you recall, was at what we call the old yard on North Avenue, the old Public Works yard. But we have an issue there in the short term, in that we have a CDBG project that's going to tear down the buildings on that site. So we can't set up a recycling center there with the buildings getting ready to be torn down. So we got to get that done first. Some sections of the fence are in bad shape, and we would have to look at repairing those sections of the fence. We could also look at the old animal control site, which is right next to the old Public Works yard, immediately south of there, as a location. But all those were going to involve more time and more operational expenses. We would also then be in the position of having to potentially look at additional staff, because we would want all these sites to be staffed to keep contamination low. So that was some of the considerations we looked at and why we decided to roll out phase one.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Pacheco, this also gives us an opportunity to operate phase one for at least a little bit of time while the old yard's being demolished and we see if that's a viable location. But it gives us time to operate it. It gives us time to see how well the amount of recyclables that people bring in, how well the program does, and exactly what it costs to staff it before we look at expanding to other areas.
And I think it's all well and good, but I will tell you the old animal control site right now has 2 semi-trailers parked on it, and there's a lot of empty space there that I know it doesn't have a fence around it, et cetera, but we have commercial people using our land, and we need to look into that because it should be our property. That's the part that's not fenced in, obviously, that the local folks are using the place to park their big trucks or the big trailers, and we shouldn't be allowing that. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. not to get too much in the weeds on this, but the area by Tompkins Park, kind of, I guess it's kind of northwest, where there's some kind of storage stuff there. You know,
You talking about the park storage,
is that, okay. I was just curious if
north
that's,
of the dog park, right?
yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. I was wondering if that would be a location possibility.
Councilmember Calhoun, that would realistically be too small for what we're looking at. We would need more space.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Pacheco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have a plan in place or budgeted the, I guess, public outreach aspect of doing this kind of a huge change?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can accommodate it within our existing budget. We've already started talking with the Public Affairs Office about it, so they're ready to go. They have the press release typed up. It's in my inbox right now. I was waiting till after this work session to start sending information out.
And speaking of that, why don't you hit your summary slide and then we'll talk next
Yes.
steps.
All right, so just in summary, you can see the current revenue that we have in the from column there, and then the options we've presented you, the range of proposed revenue for these 3 different programs. And that's all I have.
So the question then becomes, what is the staff's recommendations, Victoria?
Mr. Mayor, the low end of the revenue projection there is roughly equivalent to the amount that needed to be made up. So if you would choose the low end, we would be successful in making up the amount of revenue that we sought to make up, or the loss. The high end is what the potential we think is there to make some additional money. And so my recommendation is to go with the high end on each of them. But if you would choose to go with the other option, we would still achieve the making up the shortfall in revenue that we need to do.
So this is now a recommendation to us for discussion.
Yes.
When is it coming to us as a formal proposal?
It would, Mr. Mayor. Council does need to vote on these fee increases.
Okay, so what I would ask you to do then is to develop your proposal as you recommended to the council. It should come back to us then in a work session and for a vote, a work session for discussion and a vote,
It would be in June, Mr. Mayor.
okay?
And then,
So there'll be further discussion, but we need to have a formal proposal from the staff.
and then it would
a
go into
resolution.
effect July.
And it would go into effect probably July 1st or 1st of August.
That's correct.
And that wouldn't necessarily preclude us from rolling out the recycling drop-off center on July 1. Staff is committed to, making that happen. If it's the will of council, we can be ready on July 1. And we have already contracted with Republic for the roll-offs and to receive the material. So we are working towards that end.
Okay.
I have a question on that. Would that really increase, do we anticipate an increase in traffic through sometimes that line's really long to get into the refuse center?
Yeah, and actually, let me show you real quick. I got a map. Of course I have a map. I'm an engineer. Live with maps. Get that lined up.
The map and the technology.
All right. Let's see. So this is the highway up here. So currently, we have the route in right through here. The recycling would actually break off right here. And you can see here, these are the roll-offs. There would be one for each different type of material. And then the people would come through the site and out. Compost goes a little different. They come in this way, but then they go down. They dispose of the green waste over here and out. So we have the 2 streams somewhat separated. We've already done the grading. Sorry. We've already done the grading on the site and have started some site prep to stabilize the surface a little bit and be ready to go.
Okay. Anything else on this? Sharon, a good briefing. And thanks for trying to save us a little money. Appreciate that. Okay. Then we'll move on to the next item, which is council executive report. Any comments on Mr. Patuchik's council executive report?
I didn't have any this time.
Okay, then we'll move on to reports on recent trips, meetings, and future meetings.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you meant just for his personal introduction. That's my.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Mine is actually about the splash pad. I am super happy that we've changed the way we're doing it and that it can be used whenever. I guess my question is there any way to monitor how much people are using it? And the reason I'm asking this is because if it is being used as much as I hope it is being used, it might be something that we can look into putting in the budget in future years because people have been asking for it.
In other parks.
In other
Yeah,
parks.
in other
In other
parks.
parks, yeah.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Wolf. I believe that there is a way to track some usage just by tracking the usage of water for the area. We do receive those invoices from the Public Works Department on a monthly basis, and I have had staff go through and look. We're just trying to learn how to break it out by that location. I go down there and I actually sit in the parking lot quite frequently just to see.
Creepy.
I'm not, but just to see, if people are using it, and it does get a lot of use.
Well, I won't say I do the same thing.
Might get arrested, but, well.
That's all I.
Okay. Anything else on the report? Okay, meetings, future meetings? Any board and commission liaison updates?
Mr. Mayor, I know you had us make appointments to come in and see you, talk about commissions. I'm having an issue with culture diversity, so I'm gonna do two things real quick. I'm gonna make a call to the public. If anyone wants to join culture diversity, let me know. We have one member, so we haven't had we only had one meeting this year, but I know we spoke about a lot of things, and I don't know if we were gonna put that on a work session now and bring it all together, or.
Well, you still haven't come to see me, have you?
Yeah, I have. I don't know if
So
everyone
who
else
had,
have.
so somebody, there's one or two people that haven't come to see me.
It's me.
Okay.
It's me. I'm not gonna.
So I haven't talked to everybody individually yet that was interested in looking at boards and commissions. And
Okay.
as soon as we get that done, we'll have a work session.
I appreciate it.
Okay?
Can we set a deadline?
You're being very tough on me right now with my chemo schedule. I hate to use that as a crutch, but that's kind of slowed me down a little bit.
After August.
Yeah, well, after August
Say
for sure.
at a certain time, we're gonna put boards and commissions on, so if anyone who wants to have that meeting, have it before that time, kind of a thing.
Well, we can certainly do it in September. I'd be comfortable with, because middle August is when I'm finished with the chemo. So,
And we're done with budget.
and we're done with budget, so we can set a goal for that discussion in September. Okay.
Oh, and we should be seeing the announcement for the call to artists for the water tower project today in like a half hour, hopefully. Who's working on that? Adam? I was told we're seeing it today.
Good job. What?
Mr. Mayor, I hate to go back to something we've already passed on, but in the executive report, there was a discussion about pool drains and how the rainwater has to be treated. And I wonder how much the community actually knows about that. Understand, who is that for Public Works? How much do they really know that the water needs to be treated before you can drain your pool?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Calhoun, the majority of pool draining is usually done by companies, and they are aware that they are required to get a permit. We don't run into too many people that are draining their own, just because with a standard hose, it would take a very long time to drain a pool out. So generally, they'll contract with a company for that service, and especially if they have a pool that uses those chemicals. We're not talking about like a above-ground pool or anything like that. Many of them don't have the chemicals, but for any of the larger scale stuff, the pool companies are aware.
So if you are aware there is a slow drain going on, oftentimes you see that water running down the street and you're looking for clouds and stuff and they're not there, and so you figure it's a pool. If an independent person is doing that, how do you handle that? Or It hasn't come up, but
Yeah. It would be on a complaint basis from someone else. If it's going into the street, we're probably not going to get a complaint on it. Someone would have to drive by and see it. Where we would get a complaint is if they're dumping it onto their neighbor's property. And in that sort of event, we would have the ability to enforce that through our stormwater regulations. And we'd certainly send someone out to take a look at that kind of situation.
okay, that's great. I thought would be a bigger issue than
Yeah,
that.
but it could be caused, and water could be caused by a variety of things, could be caused by a broken line. But anytime we get a concern, we always send someone out to take a look at it. And most of the time, it is a water line break, so we notify the appropriate water company.
Thank you.
We already talked about one future discussion item. Anything else or council requests? Yes.
At some soon point, could we put down to go over the council procedure manual? We tend to look at that every couple of years, and it's about time.
Can we put that on as in October? So we got one for September, we'll get to that for October.
Sounds good.
Did you get that,
You
Victoria?
guys know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
the council handbook. Okay,
That's it.
anything else? Seeing
Well,
that,
the commission handbook, what do we do about that?
well,
Is
we
that
can look
gonna
at
be
that,
on
we can look at that at the same time.
September.
Yeah,
Or-
the handbook, we can look at October. Okay. So, any other items? Seeing none, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.